I flip the dial on my battered receiver and step out of the makeshift shelter into the ash-choked dawn. The sky hasn't been blue in years. It's an endless bruise of smoke and ember, a molten orange canopy that bleeds into horizonless gray. Every breath tastes of charred pine and scorched earth. Where I stand used to be the edge of Clearwater National Forest, towering evergreens, humming streams, and trails where campers once pitched tents under star-strewn skies. Now those trees are blackened husks, the streams reduced to steaming trickles. I walk past the skeletons of cabins' charred beams, leaning at odd angles, doorways yawning like open graves. The forest floor crackles underfoot, brittle needles, shards of glass, and odd half-melted trinkets left behind in the mad rush to escape. A twisted swing set creaks in the wind, its chains rusted, the seat still swaying as if haunted by the echoes of children's laughter. I pause, imagining the world that was, the innocence lost when the world turned to flame dot beyond the tree line. The old logging road, once a dusty ribbon winding through green delses, been overtaken by cracked tarmac and drifting ash drifts. I squint at the highway sign, "Welcome to Marlowe County Gateway to Adventure." It stares back, bent and pitted by heat. The message feels like a cruel joke. In place of adventure lies a wasteland of blackened stumps, bleached rocks, and the occasional husk of a vehicle, its tires melted into the pavement. Water is a ghost. The river that ran through town, once thick with trout and babbling over mossy stones, has retreated to a parched ribbon of cracked clay. Drought has hollowed out every pond and lake within 50 miles. We've dragged buckets into muddy pits, hoping for a drop to spare. When the river gave up its last breath, something in all of us shifted hope, became a currency fewer could afford here and there. I spot movement, ragged survivors picking through rubble for anything salvageably lolled, nails, lengths of rope, a dented can of beans. Most of us move in silence, our faces caked with soot, eyes hollow with weariness. There's no government patrol anymore. The institutions collapsed when the wildfires became unstoppable. Power grids failed, communication towers toppled, and the cities emptied out under evacuation. Warnings that never came in time. Some small communities cling to the ruins of human order, a barricaded lodge where a handful of families keep watch with crossbows and makeshift alarms. An abandoned ranger station repurposed as a clinic where a lone medic stitches burned flesh by lantern light. A ramshackle tower of corrugated metal where radio enthusiasts like me broadcast static-laced updates to anyone within reach. These pockets of life feel fragile. One stray spark, one sudden shift in wind, and they could vanish entirely. Scavengers prowl the highways in battered pickups, rolling through the dust like vultures. They flash wolves' toothed grins, demand twice what you have, and vanish as quickly as they arrive. There are rumors of a faction calling themselves the Ember Hand Bandits who torch anything that might feed a rival camp's fire, hoarding resources to keep themselves alive. I've heard their laughter on the wind during the blackest nights, and it still sends a chill through me. At the same time, hope flickers in unexpected places. A handful of volunteers trek miles to haul water from a distant well, hauling drums. Across scorched meadows, there's a small orchard, miraculously spared, where someone has planted tomato seedlings, and tended them with prayer. A battered solar panel outpost on a ridge catches the last light of each smoky sunset, charging batteries that feed our radios and our connection to the fragile dream that somewhere beyond the horizon of flame, life might still find purchase. I close my eyes and let the sulphurous air fill my lungs. In the distance, the firestorm rumbles a sound like 1,000 freight trains colliding, an unending roar that reminds you this world still hungers for its final feast. Yesterday the wind shifted and embers danced across the ridge in a crimson storm. We fought with damp blankets and buckets of ash-tainted water, but the flames keep coming back, relentless as time. Every landmark is an echo. The old church steeple collapsed into a heap of beams. The high school football field, now nothing but charred goalposts. Even the river's bridge has buckled, its girders twisted into grotesque sculptures. Civilization has slipped through our fingers like ash, and the only monuments left are the scars etched into the land and into our souls. As I lift my voice into the microphone, I speak for the lost forest, for the families who never made it, out for the hope we refuse to let die. The world around me may have turned to ruin, but our spark, however, dim still glows. I pause, listening to the crackle of static in my ear, and steel myself for whatever comes next. Because out here, in this world devoured by fire, the only certainty is the fight to keep breathing and to keep believing that tomorrow's sky might allow a single shaft of blue to break through. I am the voice you hear crackling over the rasp and pop, a reminder that I'm still here, still breathing, still fighting. My name is Nora Caldwell, though out here, names are as fragile as paper in a wildfire. I learned that early on when I watched the name tags of my colleagues curl and blackened under a scorching sky at the research station. I was a climatologist then, tending sensors and satellites, crunching data to predict weather patterns ironically, the very science that failed to stop the infernos that swallowed our world before the world fell apart. I lived in a modest house on the outskirts of Ridgefield, Washington, with my partner Alina and our daughter, June. We spent evenings in the garden, watching fireflies dance among the foxglove. I taught June to identify saplings by their bark. Alina coaxed tomatoes from the soil. There was a rhythm to life, simple, predictable, safe. Now, predictability is a luxury, and every breath could be your last. Survival here is a matter of ritual. First light finds me checking the barrel of rainwater. We managed to trap 2 weeks of praise for whatever scraps of moisture the ash-laden clouds allow. I measure it with a chipped enamel cup and mark the level on the shelter wall where tally marks track our dwindling days. Next, I feed the hand-cranked generator. A dozen spins give me enough charge to broadcast my daily report weather conditions. Known safe routes for foraging, warnings of shifting winds that could fan fresh flare-ups miles away. Then I check the perimeter, broken glass shards woven into tripwire, fallen branches laid like spikes. I've learned that even scavengers have become desperate enough to stalk each other. My broadcast is more than a survival tactic. It's my tether to humanity. I speak into the microphone not because I expect someone to answer those sometimes. I do hear faint replies, but because the act itself affirms I exist. Each word is a heartbeat. Every static, blurred sentence is a prayer against oblivion. I survive day to day on foraged supplies, canned beans buried beneath rubble, wilted kale sprouting in an abandoned schoolyard, water from a spring that bubbles, through fissures in charred bedrock. I barter with passing caravans extra broadcast in exchange for a solar-charged battery or a handful of seeds. I've learned to be concise and wary. Trust is a rare commodity, and my voice has carried warnings of ember hand raids too often to count. What drives me is a memory of June's laugh, her small, wordless giggle when I brought her a dandelion she insisted was a star. I carry that laughter in my chest like a secret ember, impossible to extinguish. When despair creeps in, when I see the dry riverbed and the skeletons of pines, close my eyes and hear her voice, "Mommy, will the world come back?" I answer each time, "We'll do our best, sweetheart," even though I'm not sure it's true. Speaking it into the darkness keeps the ember alive. Responsibility weighs on me like a pack of stones. I wasn't the only broadcaster once. There were dozens of us across the region. One by one, we fell silent electrocutions, smoke inhalation, raider attacks, or sometimes just the weight of sorrow. When I'm on air, I know someone, somewhere, is listening. Maybe a child in a bunker, maybe an old woman in a crumbling church, maybe someone who remembers making dinner in a green backyard. If all I do is remind them that they're not alone in the void, that they matter, then I've done my job. But it isn't without cost. I wake most nights covered in sweat from nightmares, June's pleading face peering through the smoke, Elena's silhouette drifting away in flickering firelight. I wake before dawn, the acrid taste of ash still in my mouth. Some mornings, I find my hands shaking so badly I can't crank the generator. In those moments, I stand by the radio and speak into silence, telling stories about foxglove petals, about rain's soft pattern till my hands steady. It's a performance for an empty room, but it reminds me that memory is survival. I've lost more than I can count. Friends who scavenged too close to a flare-up. Colleagues who argued we could control the burns, only to vanish when the fire's fury turned on them. My partner Alina succumbed to the smoke 4 months ago. I held her hand as the flames outside turned the night into day. She whispered, "Keep going," before the world closed around her. I buried her beneath a slab of fallen cedar, marked only by a loose pile of stones and a scrap of her red scarf. Sometimes I wonder why I'm still here, but then I remember the old orchard 10 miles north, where a few trees cling to life. I've started calling it Elena's orchard, though I've never told anyone. I've left cuttings, their seeds from the last tomato plant we tended, a slip of foxglove. If someday a traveler finds them and the blossoms bloom again, they'll know that we tried, that we believed the world could heal. There are moments of kindness amid the ruin. A traveling medic I met last week shared half her bandages and taught me how to stitch a wound with fishing line. A former teacher showed me how to press wild herbs into poultices. We exchanged stories of homes lost and children we'll never see again. When we part ways, we press a hand over our hearts and call it a blessing. It's small, but it feels monumental out here. My voice falters, sometimes the static or fatigue or shame at surviving when so many have died. But I keep speaking, I keep broadcasting, because if the last firestorm ever fades and the wind finally carries clean air, The recordings of our voices will remain. They'll be a testament that we existed, that we listened and we spoke, that we loved. In the early days, I cataloged everything scientifically: ember temperatures, wind speeds, humidity levels. I kept charts and logs, determined to find patterns. A solution. I believed data could save us. Then the hard truth settled in. The firestorm was not a variable to be controlled, but a force to be endured. Survival meant adaptation, not prediction. So now, I live by rules honed in despair. Any single camp can be incinerated in hours. I sleep light, pack light, leave no permanent traces, drink only when necessary, ration carefully, collect dew where you can. They mark their territory with graffiti, a handprint in blackened paint. If you see it, turn back. When a starving traveler begs for food, I share what I can. I've learned that mercy, twice given, can come back in unexpected kindness every morning. I repeat June's question, will the world come back? And answer, we'll do our best. These rules have kept me alive for 9 months, but rules alone aren't enough. It's the ember in my heart that fuels the generator's hum each day. It's hope flickering, fragile, relentless, that turns statistics into stories and survivors into a community some nights. I dream of a broadcast that ends with applause instead of silence, where voices answer back, not with desperate pleas, but with laughter, with optimism, where someone says, we've found water in the valley. We're planting orchards again. And I reply, I'll be there by dawn. Until then, I speak into the static. I am the last climatologist, the reluctant radio host, the witness to humanity's downfall, and the bearer of its fragile promise. I have no shield against the flame, no cure for the smoke. All I have is a battered microphone, a crank of steel, and a heart determined to keep the ember alive, one crackle, one word, one broadcast at a time. The sky trembles on the horizon. Like a live thing, an ever-expanding wall of ember and ash rolling toward us with impossible speed. I hear it before I see it, a low thunder-like rumble that vibrates through the ground, through my bones, through every hollow in the forest. This is the crisis, the firestorm, that will decide whether we live another hour, another day, another breath. I've tracked wildfires before, studied their patterns, measured their advance against wind speed and humidity. But this is a beast born of centuries of heat and neglect. It moves faster than a locomotion scientist could have predicted, leaps fire breaks no line of trucks can hold, and burns with a ferocity that melts steel and turns water to steam in an instant. Scientists once warned of fire hurricanes spinning, columns of flame that generate their own weather, drawing in air to fuel winds over 100 miles per hour. We're living inside one now. The air's temperature hovers near 200 degrees Fahrenheit in the core. Any living thing caught in that vortex is vaporized. Out at the margins, embers swirl like deadly snowflakes, igniting trees, brush, even the ground's peat layers. Shallow soil pockets of organic matter smolder for days, sending up new spot fires far from the blaze's leading edge. Humidity plummets below 5% at midday. Fuel moisture content, the measure of how readily wood and foliage will down in the single digits. At these conditions, even green leaves act like tinder. The wind howls through charred trenches, howling like a chorus of lost souls. The plume of smoke is so thick, even life support filters on gas. Masks can only faintly clear it. This inferno has fractured the survivor landscape into scattered cells. Some operate like ghost towns, drops of humanity hiding in underground bunkers, tunnel networks beneath collapsed infrastructure. Others roam in predatory packs, raiders called the Ember Hand, wield scorched pipe rifles and demand tribute from any group unfortunate enough to cross their path. They scorch fields, kill scavengers, and leave nothing behind but ash and despair. But there are pockets of resistance. I've traded broadcasts with a group calling themselves the White Fur Collective Scientists turned Foragers, who map out safe corridors through the underbrush, following old mountain trail markers. They harvest pine needles for weaving baskets, collect medicinal fungi that pop up after fires, and cultivate small terrariums of moss in hollowed logs. Their leader, Dr. Malik Reyes, was once a mycologist. He believes that fungus-driven soil regeneration could offer a sliver of ecological rebirth once the flames pass. On a clear sky evening 3 weeks ago, I tuned in to his crackling signal, and for a moment I felt the ghost of hope. Then came word that Ember hand-raided the collective's supply cache, stole their solar panels, torched their shot several members. The last transmission was Dr. Reyes' voice, trembling. If you're out there, remember to look down. Life always starts in the ashes, and then silence. Each season, the fire season, expands. What used to be a few months of risk now lasts nearly year-round. Snowpacks melt earlier, summer rains vanish. Lightning storms sweep through tinder, dry air. Rivers that once acted as natural fire breaks wide cold, fuller reduced to cracked channels that can't deliver a drop to quench even a single ember. The science is inescapable. Global average temperatures have risen by nearly 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit since 1980. Atmospheric aridity has jumped by 10%. Monsoonal weather patterns that once filled the western mountains with summer storms have shifted poleward. Now our only precipitation comes in punishing deluges that flash flood the scorched terrain, washing away what little topsoil remains. When the rains finally come, they're a double-edged sword, too little to truly refill lakes, too much to soak deep into the clay. Instead, they coat the charred hillsides in mud, triggering landslides that bury survivors in their bunkers. That's how Maya died. She thought the rain would bring relief. Instead, a wall of earth crushed the stone cellar she'd carved out. Beneath her cabin, water is the first casualty. In the weeks after the Great Flame, when the inferno swept from valley to valley in a single week, reservoirs boiled and cracked. Pipes from the town's water treatment plant warped in the heat, filters fused. Rainwater catchments, once secondary sources, were contaminated by ashfall. We resort to scooping dew from the underbellies of leaves at dawn, filtering it through layers of cloth and sand. Still, we ration ourselves to half a liter per person per dage, enough to stave off heat stroke. Food runs on the same razor's edge. Canned goods spoil in the heat. Seeds rot in storage. We've cracked open emergency forage guides, learned to identify edible roots in the blackened, soil-bitter horseweed, tough as twine. Migratory birds, eggs in hollow stumps, but only if you can outpace the scavenger owls. Any mistake means hours of vomiting, delirium, sometimes death dot fuel for the generator, is gold-dried ethanol salvaged from abandoned labs. Tiny canisters of propane discovered in half-buried cabins. I'd trade a week's worth of rainwater ration for a single canister, but the Ember Hand scouts those deals, and negotiating with them is a gamble. Twice I've tried to strike a bargain. Twice they laughed and took my battery bank, leaving me with nothing but a warning broadcast: less, crawl more. 2 nights ago, the wind shifted before midnight. I was sleeping in the hollow of a fallen fir radio pack at my side. I woke to the smell of smoke and the distant snap of burning branches. I scrambled, gathered equipment, and stumbled into a clearing just as a small band of survivors for souls silhouetted against the glours across a ridgeline. They were led by a man in a scorched lab coat, his name badge still pinned to the pocket, Dr. Armand Haas. I recognized him from my days at the satellite observatory. We'd mapped wildfire hotspots together. His hair was singed white, his face hollowed by hunger, but his eyes blazed with purpose. They were searching for a creek he'd noted in his Journal 1, he believed, still fed into an underground aquifer. He promised me a share of the water if I guided them to the location. I hesitated. Guiding for strangers through fire-scorched terrain, with Ember Hand likely trailing them, could mean my own death. But I saw the desperation in Dr. Haas. Ice reminded me of June's. I agreed. For 2 days, we navigated ash-blind trails, crossed ridges pockmarked by tree fall, and scouted a stream that ran thin but carried a steady pulse. The water was brackish, but after filtering through my ceramic pump, it tasted of hope. We camped there a night for strangers, huddled around a half cup of cold creek water, passing bottles until they emptied, hearts pounding with relief. Flames have never reached a place where trees still sway in green light. Some call it the green sorrow, a myth whispered by travelers. Dr. Haas clutched his journal, marked with coordinates that might be real, but hope breeds risk. As dawn broke, the Ember Hand stormed our camp, drawn by the smell of burning twigs and the flicker of our campfire. We scattered. I ran blind through a gauntlet of snipers, felt bullets rip past, heard Dr. Haas scream as he fell. I dragged him to a hollow, applied a tourniquet made from my scarf, and whispered fragments of the broadcast into his ear. Don't give up. The spark of life lives in the ashes. He limped away at dawn, leaving me alone again. The streams. Whispering flow was a lullaby I didn't deserve. I collected what water I could carry and headed back to my transmitter, Dr. Haas. Journal remains in my pack coordinates, scrawled in ink that's nearly run from sweat. I've learned a few rules in this crucible. Fires burn uphill faster than they do downhill plan. Your roots along contours, not straight lines. Rock outcrops and ravines can break wind, offering brief pockets of lower temperatures. Cross them during the fire's passing. Ember storms die back when the temperature drops, but don't linger do falls heavy, making footing treacherous. Improvised sheeting dipped in ashwater mud can act as crude but effective personal shields, enough to crawl through ember clouds. When the main front passes, the embers continue. Pause only long enough to bury small hot spots with dirt. Every day the zone of passable terrain shrinks. Fire lines converge, leaving fewer corridors to safety. Ember storms seed new blazes, so yesterday's refuge can be tomorrow's tomb. Wind patterns shift with climate change. What was a southerly breeze once is now a dust-laden gale from the east, carrying embers from fires we didn't even know existed. Communications fail, batteries die, antennas sag under ash. I broadcast less now, only critical alerts, conserving power, hoping someone out there still hears me. I measure survival by minutes of signal, by the freshness of my water, by the weight of Dr. Haas' journal against my ribs. Yet in the darkness, in the echo of collapsing trees, I remind myself, crisis reveals character. It strips you bare until only your impulse to fight remains. I fight for the spark in my chest, for June's laughter, for the promise of the green sorrow. I fight because giving up means letting the fire claim not just the forest, but the last embers of our humanity. And so I stand before the microphone, voice like gravel over steel, ready to broadcast today's reality. Winds are changing, embers are stirring, and the firestorm surges closer. But somewhere beyond the brink, I believe there's a place untouched by Flame Valley, hidden in mist, where life breathes anew. I'll keep speaking, keep walking, keep believing until I find it, or until the world's last ember dies. I wake to the sound of shifting ash. Rain fell last night, just enough to leave a thin crust of mud on the radio antenna, but not enough to recharge the solar cells. My water ration sits at a quarter cup, the last drip from the creek tasted of iron and smoke. I run my tongue along cracked lips, reminding myself that this shortage is only temporary, that somewhere beyond the black horizon, fresh water still runs free. But hope feels like a twisted gift these days, tempting in the hand, but bitter. In the mouth, I pack my bag ceramic filter, half-empty canteen, Dr. Haas' battered journal, and a single cache of pemmican that tastes of salt and memory. Food is rationed by the must-survive rule. 1 meal per day, 2 meals on the march if necessary. My stomach growls, but I push it down. Hunger is a whisper. Thirst is a scream. I swing the pack over my shoulders and step into the morning haze. As I trudge along the ridge, the landscape shifts from charred forest to open. Every shrub is skeletal, every rock face streaked with soot. I pause to scan the valley below, a riverbed of glassy ash, a platform of cracked earth. Their territory grows as ours shrinks. I detour through a narrow ravine where towering boulders block the wind and offer a pocket of relative calm. Here I find a handful of survivors, 2 men and a woman huddled around a dying flicker of fire. Their faces are gaunt, eyes shadowed by desperation. They look up as I approach, hands inching toward weapons carved from metal scraps. I lift my empty palms in greeting. I'm not Ember Hand, I say softly, just passing through. They relax marginally, though wariness lingers. The man in front, clutching a jagged pipe, asks the question we all ask, got water? I hold up my filter. There's a seep down the trail, I tell them, half a canteen's worth. Their relief is a dagger in my chest. Why should I share my lifeline? But I remember June's laugh and Elena's tender coaxing. Mercy costs little. It demands only the ember in your heart. I hand over the filter and show them the route. They offer me half their pemmican bar in return, fractured and oily. I tuck it into my pack, knowing it will be my next meal. We move together through a field of charred stumps, The trio and I, every snap of a twig sets our nerves jangling. A lone hawk circles above, its cry unbroken by the wind. As we descend toward the creek, the woman thin, fierce, with eyes too old for her age, quietly passes me a folded scrap of paper. Saw this in Ember Hand's camp, she whispers. Coordinates, north past the ridge. They call it the Oasis. Points to a smudged grid of numbers. Latitude and longitude scrawled in black soot. They keep it secret. Maybe they guard it because it's real. I fold the paper carefully and press it against my chest. A new mythor, a new answer. Could Ember Hand truly hoard a water source strong enough to feed dozens? Or is it a trap laid to lure desperate souls into ambush? My heart races as I weigh the risk. My own survival depends on that water. But so does the fragile bond I'm forging with these strangers. Trust is a currency more precious than water here, and just as easily forged to deceive. We reach the creek's bed, just a trickle of grayish water seeping through cracked stones. I kneel and run my filter. The others collect the first cold, drops they've had in days. Their gratitude is a chorus of soft murmurs, echoing off stone walls. I watch them drink, the slump of their shoulders releasing a fraction of tension. They look more human now, freed for a moment from the machine of survival. But I can't forget the world outside this ravine, the Ember Hand prowling the ridges, the firestorm creeping closer each day, the water that will not last. I decide to share the legend of the oasis, though I mask my excitement. I once heard of a valley where the sun never burns the earth, I say, tucking Haas' journal into my coat, where springs bubble up from deep aquifers and trees grow tall enough to shade your face. They say the soil there blooms forever after a fire. The third survivor, silent man with a scar across his cheeks, smiles faintly. We'll go there, he says. If it's real, his certainty is contagious. Suddenly, what felt like a slow death march becomes a stupendous journey. We plan our route in whispers. At dawn, we skirt the Ember Hand's eastern flank, cross a dry wash, then ascend the ridge to the north. Our provisions are meager 3 canteens, a handful of pemmican, and mismatched knives butt. Purpose fuels us more than gear ever could. As night falls, we huddle around a tiny flame, plotting and listening for the distant roar of the inferno. I broadcast a single message before resting my head, radio silent for 2 days, heading toward coordinates. If anyone hears this, follow the firebreak on grid line 32. I don't mention the oasis. Truth is a luxury best revealed in person. The journey begins before first light. I slip through Ember Hand's domain, under cover of darkness shadows. Among shadows, the wind carries embers that dot the sky like fallen stars. I pause at the ridge's crest and look back. My makeshift shelter, the ravine's sanctuary, the narrow corridor that linked them. Leaving this behind feels like a betrayal of every ember I've fought to keep alive, but survival demands forward motion. Trust demands risk. Halfway across the dry wash, the ground suddenly trembles. A sub-epicenter quake. Know something bigger. The firestorm has shifted. A massive wall of flame curls over the next ridge, wind-driven tongues licking at the sky. We freeze as the heat washes over us, fumes stinging our lungs. It's one thing to track fires on maps. It's another to stand on the verge of extinction and watch the world burn before your eyes. The scarred man, whom I've learned is named Caleb, pushes me aside. He throws down the pack and stands tall. "We run," he shouts. "Don't look back." The woman, Marta, grabs his arm. "Wait." I clutch Haas' journal in the chest pocket of my jacket. The pages are stained with sweat and ash, but the coordinates remain legible. If the oasis is Reland, if Ember Hand has guarded it, then we may be the first honest souls to find it. I dig through the pages and find the section where Haas describes the valley's microclimate, a cool rain belt that forms above a hidden spring fed by groundwater from distant mountains. I shout back, voice hoarse, "This way, follow me," and sprint toward a rocky outcrop that offers a narrow passage. Marta and Caleb follow, water sloshing in their canteens. Beneath our feet, shards of volcanic rock cut into our boots. Ember heated. Winds whip around us, throwing ash that scrapes our faces raw. Halfway through the passage, I stumble, and Marta catches me. "You okay?" she asks, her voice fierce with concern. I swallow a sob, shake my head, and we press on. We emerge onto a plateau dotted with blackened stumps. Ahead, the ridge lofts into the sky, its crest-lined with jagged pines that somehow survived. In their shadow, I glimpse a river of gray mist hanging above the ground. My heart stutters. This isn't smoke, it's vapor. Myriad droplets swirl. In the air, condense on our sleeves. The microclimate Haas described must be real. I press a hand to my cheek. The air is cool and damp, tinged with the scent of moss. My lungs, starved for moisture, fill with grace. Marta and Caleb stare at me, breathless. I can only whisper, "Welcome to the oasis." For a long moment, we stand in silence, three weary survivors on the brink of collapse, bathed in mist that promises life. Then the firing crack of twig snaps us back. Ember Hand patrols spot us from the ridge above. Their lanterns bob like vultures on the lookout. They're closing in. Rising tension coils in my chest as I glance at Marta and Caleb. Their faces illuminated by moonlight. Trust, betrayal. There isn't time to ponder. I shout, run downhill. Stay in the mist until morning, scrambling toward the source. Water beads on every surface fills our mouths with sweet promise. I scoop up handfuls of mist and let it gather into droplets, then drink like a man reborn. Behind us, Ember Hand's shouts ring out, punctuated by pistol fire. I feel a sting in my thigh and stumble, but Caleb yanks me to my feet. Marta presses a hand over the wound. It's shallow, but bleeding fast. "Keep moving," she urges. This way through the grove, we burst into a stand of ancient firs, their branches heavy with moisture. The mist clings thick, weaving around our boots, cloaking our passage. We emerge in a hidden basin, a pool of clear water, 6 feet deep, fed by a spring at its center. Ferns and moss carpet the rocks, and wildflowers bloom in clusters of blue and gold. I drop to my knees and splash the water on my face. It's cold, shockingly so, but nourishing. I fill the canteen, refill the filter, and pass it to Marta, who cries as she drinks. Caleb kneels and cups water in his hands, splashing it over his head as if baptized. For a moment, the world holds its breath. We are alive, fully, miraculously alive. The firestorm's roar is distant now, muffled by the press of growing spruce. I pull out my microphone and broadcast a single line. If anyone hears this, the oasis is real. Last known coordinates, grid 47.2 north, 120.5 west. Bring water containers. Bring hope. My voice cracks with emotion, but I hold the note until the signal fades. I look at Marta and Caleb faces streaked with ash and tears, eyes shining with the first spark of true belief I've felt in months. My thigh throbs, but I barely notice. We have risked everything and found what we sought. The camp of Emberhand looms behind the ridge, but this valley is our sanctuary at least for now. The rising action of our lives has brought us to this moment, on the cusp of salvation or slaughter, depending on the choices we make next. I stand by the water's edge, hands submerged in the clear pool, heart pounding with renewed purpose. The firestorm may rage, the ember hand may hunt, and resources may dwindle again but for this night. In this hidden valley of mist and moss, hope brews stronger than any ember. And as long as I draw breath, I will fight to keep it burning. The dawn is still hours away when the ground shudders beneath my feet, a low tremor that ripples through the mist-cloaked basin. I've been here before quakes in the fractured earth, warning us that the scars of wildfire run deeper than the surface. But this is different. This tremor carries a low-frequency roar, a pressure like the world itself is taking a breath before one final exhale. I clutch the mouth of the spring-fed pool, raindrop cool water dripping through my fingers, and I feel the water pulse as if in time with the quake. I turn to Marta and Caleb. Marta's lips are already white from thirst. Caleb's wavering silhouette shows his confusion. We've stayed in this valley longer than we should have 2 full days to refill canteens, to let the moss beds reclaim their color, to dream of a spark of civilization rising here. But Arden's later forecast speaks of ash-laden storms rolling back in with the next southerly gale. We need to leave before the firestorm closes this valley like a tomb, and then it comes. The sky cracks. Above the eastern ridge, a wall of gray-black cloud unfurls, heavier than any smoke I've seen. It writhes like a living thing fed by subterranean heat, and the mist that once sheltered us backlights with an unnatural green luminescence. Marta gasps. Toxic rain, she whispers. They said it could happen. I taste the air. It's acrid, tinged with ozone, and something acridly chemical. My heart slams. This rain, born from ash smoke, interacting with high-altitude nitrogen compounds, will burn through our lungs, dissolve our filters, poison the water we risked everything to rescue. If we stay, we will all die here drowned in our salvation. I rip off a strip of fabric from my shirt, knotting it over my mouth and nose. But the crack of thunder isn't thunder. It's the sky itself splitting apart, letting loose a hiss that sounds like a million serpents uncoiling. Then the first drop falls, a bead of oily water that pings against the ferns and sizzles before evaporating. Caleb's eyes widen. It'll seize our lungs, he says, voice shaking. There's nowhere to hide. I look around for shelter. Overhangs Hollow's Butt. This basin is open, carved smooth by millennia of glacial melt and forest fires. The nearest ridge is 50 feet above us, but the fissures will amplify the quake if I try to climb. Even in daylight, I might slip. In this rain, the rock will become a slick slide to death. Marta makes a choice before I can speak. She grabs my arm. We fill what we can, and we run. She pulls the canteens from her pack 5 already full to empty and thrusts them at me. I hesitate. If I leave empty canteens behind, they'll be worthless to anyone who might come after us, searching for the oasis. But to linger means inhaling poison. My gaze flicks to the spring's lip. The water here is pure no ash, no heat, no fire. It was the first thing I discovered, and it's our greatest treasure. But right now, it's death's gateway. I take a deep breath and nod. Go, I tell them. To Caleb, a low moan rumbles through the basin. The rain begins in earnest now, pelting the ground in staccato bursts. It smells like burning plastic. I pull my tattered coat over my head and sprint after them, slipping through mud churned black by toxic ash. Marta and Caleb forge ahead, silhouettes in the green glow gloom. Behind us, the pool steams and hisses, tiny explosions as each drop strikes the water's surface at the basin's rim. We scramble up a bank of wet moss, leaving footprints that vanish in the flowing slurry. The rain intensifies, drenching my mask, seeping into my clothes, chilling me through to the bone. My lungs burn, filters straining against the chemical load. I double over, retching into the mud, the taste of metal in my mouth. Marta reaches for me, but I push her hand away. Keep going, I gasp. We cross the plateau in a haze of dizziness and desperation. Each step feels heavier than the last, as if gravity itself has turned traitor. His chest, eyes rolling back. Marta catches him, propping him upright. Come on, she urges, dragging him forward. I stay beside them, forcing my legs to move. The ridge looms, black pines clawing at the green sky. Halfway up, another tremor, hits stronger this time. A crack splits the ground in front of us. A talon of exposed rock and dirt, yawning like a mouth ready to swallow us whole. Marta leaps. Caleb tumbles. I cut to the right, jumping with the last ounce of strength I own. My boot catches the ridge, and I tumble to my knees, scrabbling to catch myself behind me. Sparks dance on the ground where the rain meets the ash, a spark that ignites a patch of dry needles. A miniature firestorm erupts, feeding on the fog's moisture-fed oils. Within seconds, it balloons into a ring of fire that encircles us, twisting the mist into a burning tornado. I whip off my coat and cover Caleb, dragging him to his feet. Marta hollers, grabbing my free arm. We can't go back, she screams. The basin's poison. This ridge is death. I take a hard decision, my will solidifying like cooled magma. The only path is forward, through the blaze. I'll lead them through, or I'll die trying. I brace my feet at the base of the ridge, twisting so the wind carries smoke past us, not into our lungs. I inhale through what little filter remains in my mask. On my mark, I say, voice raw, 3, 2, 1, go. We burst into motion, sprinting headlong into the flames. The heat slaps us, fierce and scorching. The green mist behind us clawed at our lungs. This fire roars at our skin. I feel my shoulders sear through my coat, tears of pain stabbing my nerve endings. Caleb stumbles, but Marta hauls him upright and pushes him forward. I stagger, vision blurring, but I force one foot in front of the other. For a stretch of seconds that feel like lifetimes, we run through the inferno flames licking our calves, smoke blinding us, embers snagging on our clothes. I focus on the ridge's far edge, a narrow band of grey sky that promises safety. My lungs scream for air. My heart pounds like a sledgehammer in my ribs. I think of June's laugh, drifting like a bell from a memory I can barely reach. And then, as suddenly as it began, the flames part. We break out onto the ridge crest, tumbling into a grove of charred pines whose boughs arc overhead fingers of wood that shield us from the inferno's maw. The firestorm continues to rage below, but here, the wind shifts, carrying heat away. We collapse in a heap, gasping, trembling, and alive. Caleb's face is a mask of pain. Marta's eyes shine with relief. I taste blood in my mouth, spit it onto the sodden needles. My coat smolders at the edges, but I can still breathe. I pull off my mask and suck in deep lungfuls of damp air. They're not pure, they're still. Ash and chemical tang, but they're not instant death. I look at my companions, faces streaked with soot and tears. You made it, I whisper, voice hoarse beyond recognition. We all made it. But the turning point demands more than survival. We cannot stay on this ridge. The toxic rain will follow, and the Ember Hand will hunt us here. We need a new plan, one that uses the water we risked our lives for and the oasis we nearly lost. I reach for Haas' journal in my pack, wet pages clinging together. In the margin is a note I scrawled the first night I found the spring. Sanctuary. Must be shared. I flip back to Dr. Reyes' theories on fungus-driven soil recovery how, after an inferno, the right array of mycelium can regenerate topsoil in years instead of decades. That theory, paired with this hidden water source, could seed the first steps toward reclaiming the land. I share my vision with Marta and Caleb. We'll gather spores from the moss and fungi here, use the spring's water to cultivate starter beds, and broadcast instructions to survivors across the region. The oasis becomes not just our refuge, but a nursery for the world's rebirth. Martin nods, determination replacing exhaustion in her gaze. Caleb exhales a raspy laugh. We'll need more hands, he says, but you saved us. I trust you'll find them. The quake rumbles again, echoing from the valley below. The inferno's roar is a distant symphony now, its fury contained behind the ridge's spine. We stand, unsteady but unbroken, and I lift my radio pack. I clutch the microphone like a lifeline. This is Nora Caldwell, I say, voice clear despite the crackle of static. The oasis lives. I have water and life here on it. A plan too. Plant hope in the ash. If you can hear me, come. We are not beyond saving. In that moment, the turning point crystallizes. I am no longer merely a voice in the static, a lone survivor clinging to embers. I am the spark that will ignite anew, dawn a broadcast of life into the darkness, a promise that from the ashes we will regrow. And as the sun's first pale light breaks over the ridge, I know we will rise again. The dawn after the firestorm felt impossibly quiet. I woke curled against the charred trunk of a fallen pine, the acrid sting of smoke still clinging to my hair. Marta and Caleb lay nearby, breathing shallow but alive, their bodies wrapped in blankets woven from moss and scavenged cloth. Above us, the sky had cleared to a fragile, pale blue and alien sight after nights of green-tinged toxic rain. Our ridge of ash, as I've started calling it, was scarred but intact. The flames had crept up the slope in a snarling spiral, then collapsed in on themselves when the wind shifted. In their place lay a ring of blackened needles and twisted branches, a moat of destruction surrounding the cradle of the oasis. I pushed myself upright, limbs trembling. and paused to take in the aftermath. The basin below still huffed with billows of steam, where rainwater hissed against the smouldering soil. But within our valley our hidden sanctuary life persisted. Fern, fronds, partially singed, reached toward the sun. Mushrooms dotted the moss beds, their caps glossy with moisture. At the spring's edge, water danced over rocks, clear and sweet. Despite the horrors of the night before, this place had endured. In its endurance lay our greatest hope. I moved first to check the supplies we'd risked so much to protect. The 7 canteens sat half buried in wet leaves, still full of cool, potable water. I uncapped one, let it pour into the pool, watching how the droplets stirred the glassy surface into gentle ripples. Then I filled my own bottle, drinking deeply until the cold chased away the last echoes of the toxic rain's burn. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't in months. A flicker of relief, so bright it threatened to blind me. Marta stirred beside me, blinking at the light. She sat up, brushing mud from her sleeves. "We made it," she said softly, as if afraid to believe. Caleb rose more slowly, pressing a hand to the wound on my thigh already scabbed over and tinged with green from the poultice she'd applied. "You did it, Nora," he said. "We did it." I forced a smile, though my heart still thumped with the memory of running through the ring of fire. "We survived," I replied. "But survival isn't enough." I emptied another canteen into a battered pan I'd salvaged our first step toward rebuilding. I set it over small flames lit with damp twigs, coaxing a stew of wild mushrooms and roots to simmer. The aroma rose in a thin wisp, faint, earthy, promising. In the wake of our narrow escape, the oasis became the fulcrum of our new purpose. No longer did I simply broadcast daily drift reports or rationed weather warnings. I began sending out instructions, how to find the valley, how to navigate the ridges safely, how to filter the spring water and plant the first fungal spores. My voice crackled across the static, but for the first time, my messages carried more than survival tips. They carried a blueprint for renewal. Over the next week, Ware rafted trails leading down the mountain and marked them with stone cairns. At night, we lit small signal fires controlled burns to keep the ember hand at bay while guiding hopeful travelers. A half-dozen survivors arrived, gaunt and wary, drawn by the promise of water and reprieve. Each brought something to the table: a pack of barley, a flask of antiseptic bead, even a handful of heirloom bean seeds passed down from grandparents before the world burned. Mara, an agronomist from the ruined foothill farms, joined our trio, her eyes shining with the first vestiges of hope I'd seen in weeks. Yes, dash and no. The larger crisis still raged beyond our hidden circle. Ember hand scouts prowled the ridges, and the firestorm continued its pilgrimage of devastation elsewhere. Toxic rains sometimes drifted our way on shifting winds, forcing us to retreat into cavernous rocks, where I sealed our cracks with moss and clay. Water was still scarce beyond. The spring only trickles of runoff seeped from rock fractures. Food remained a gamble. Foraging meant risking smoke inhalation or venomous snakes seeking refuge in the blackened underbrush. Yet in this valley, the worst had passed. The microclimate driven by moisture rising from the spring into us from the inferno's fiercest heat. Our fungal beds, seeded with spores from Dr. Reyes' theory, began to sprout. In basalt planters carved from fallen boulders, hyphae networks knitted together loosened soil, laying a foundation for seedlings we'd planted: alder, birch, and the scrappy wildflowers that first took root after the last ashfall. I look at my reflection in the poolies rimmed red, hair matted, clothes patched countless times, see a survivor hardened by fire. Yes, but also a catalyst for something beyond mere existence. I am no longer a lone voice in the static. I am a beacon. The decision to leave my comfortable solitude at the shelter, to risk everything for the oasis, changed me. I traded the safety of isolation for the danger and the necessity of community, in teaching others to cultivate the spring's water and nurture the soil. I learned that hope is not a passive ember, but a living flame that demands fuel, our sweat, our blood, and our unyielding belief. I feel Elena's presence here, too in every fern I press into the earth. In every seed I sow, June's laughter echoes in the drip of water from rock to pool. Their memories, once paralyzing in my nightmares, now guide my hands. Loss has become purpose, grief has become action. The world beyond this valley is still unraveling. Wildfires reclaim acreage with alarming speed. Entire watersheds have gone. Silent communities elsewhere starve on canned goods, choke on ash, vanish under the ember hand's rule. The sky remains an angry bruise most days, and storms whip dust into lethal clouds. But here, something fragile stirs. The mycelial matrix beneath our feet invisible, powerful breaks down the char layer, releasing nutrients to the surface. Moss mats absorb moisture, reducing erosion. We've begun to map the soil's pH and nutrient content, marking which areas baby alders thrive and which require extra composting from charcoal and ash. In Dr. Reyer's notebook, passed along by the White Fir Collective Eye, find methods for scaling up fungal cultivation, even in compact planters. Last night, under a sky striped with faint stars, I walked the moss gardens and touched the young, shoots peeking through the dark earth. My fingertips found the soft, springy give of living soil. In that sensation earth, so fragile it might collapse beneath my weight, and yet so alive it pulses with potential. I recognized the enormity of what we'd set in motion. Our little community, now numbering 20 souls, gathers each morning at the spring. We share our daily catch, mushrooms harvested before sun-baked heat, nettle tea brewed from tea bags repurposed into cloth filters, small tracts of the moss, gardens to tend. We named ourselves the Ashgrove Fellowship, nod to the ashes that made rebirth possible, and to the grove of trees that rings the hidden pool. Each evening, I stand at the microphone and broadcast our progress. Ashgrove, Fellowship at the hidden basin northeast of Marlow Ridge. Water is plentiful, fungal beds thriving, seedlings showing leaves. We invite survivors to harvest seeds, trade tools, and learn cultivation methods, follow cairns and signal fires. My voice, once a tremor through static, now carries the warmth of invitation. Yet, for all progress, I still wrestle with doubt. Am I worthy of this role? Did I risk too much by leading others into possible ambush? Did I betray Dr. Haas by taking his journal, then abandoning him in the firestorm? Some nights, I dream of Marion the medic who lent me bandages before disappearing on her own quest, wondering if she lies cold beneath the rubble. But each dawn, I awake to the Fellowship's low, murmur the scrape of knives peeling mushroom stems, the hum of a repaired solar cell charging a small fan to cool the makeshift infirmary, the clink of mason jars filled with seedlings. In their hands, I see trust. In their eyes, I see the ember of life shining brighter than any flame. The valley, once a black bowl of dead earth, now wears a coat of green. Moss spreads like living carpet. Ferns unfurl their fronds with tentative grace. Older seeds drift on spring breezes into new crevices. Water table tests show the basin's aquifer holding, strong, feeding the springs that feed us. On clear nights, the moonlight glitters on the pool's mirrored surface, beacon to any travelers who still cling to hope. We've started a simple ritual. Each morning, someone stands by the spring and drops a handful of spores into the water. Tiny offering to the earth, a promise that we will steward this place. I sometimes kneel beside them, letting the cool current wash over my hands. Feeling gratitude swells so fiercely it threatens to overflow. The world beyond will not change overnight. Ember storms will flare again. Ember hand may encircle us. The sky may blacken once more, but here, in this basin of mist and moss, we've built a foothold and outpost of life in a sea of death. I envision future broadcasts, coordinates for new sites of renewal, networks of ash grove, offshoots planting green havens across the wasteland. Perhaps one day the soil itself will remember forests, rivers will remember trout, and children will learn to chase fireflies again instead of running. From flames, I rise from the water's edge as the sun's first rays paint the mist in ribbons of gold. Marta tends the fungal trays. Caleb charts the day's foraging routes. The others prepare breakfast, voices low in contented hum. I press my hand against the spring's stone lip and close my eyes. Thank you, I whisper to the earth. To Alina, to June, to Dr. Reyes, to every voice that never fell silent in the static. The falling action of our story is neither an end nor a reset. It is a continuum, grief yielding to purpose, destruction sowing the seeds of renewal, a lone survivor becoming the guardian of life's fragile promise. I open my eyes and step into the day, carrying with me the weight of loss and the spark of hope. The world may remain broken, but herein the oasis of Ashgrofter, first chapter of its healing, has begun. I don't know if this will be my last broadcast, or if my voice will crack and fade into static long before then. The wind beyond the basin has shifted back to the south, carrying distant roars of flame and the faint scent of burning cedar. Ember hand scouts move along the ridge with watchful eyes, and I hear the drone of drones remnants of the old worlds. Surveillance tech, repurposed now to hunt water sources. The world beyond Ashgrove's mist is far from tamed Dot, and yet, here in this hidden valley, I find myself staring into a cup of clear spring water and tasting something I thought I'd forgotten. Possibility. We harvested mushrooms from the fungal beds. Today enough to add to our stew, enough to remind our bodies that flavor still exists. Seeds sprouted in the moss planters, tiny green forks pushing through ash dark soil toward light. A single, older sapling stands a foot tall now, its leaves trembling in the cool evening breeze. It's a small thing, but it feels monumental. Hope is a fragile thing. It can flicker out in an instant, a sapling charred by stray ember, a cache of water spoiled by surprise rain, a friend lost to desperation on a foraging mission. This morning I found 2 empty canteens by the spring whisper thin, the work of someone desperate enough to drink without filter. I traced broken footprints into the woods. They ended at a scorched hollow where someone must have collapsed. I left behind 3 full bottles and a note hammered into the bark. Take what you need, share what you can, N by nightfall. The bottles were gone. Maybe whoever drank from them survived, maybe not. But the note remained, fading, bark healing over the Taxan echo of kindness. Survival here is a choice made each dawn. Every morning I step out of my lean-to and listen. The rhythm of water dripping into the pool, the rustle of ferns, the murmur of my small community waking. I look to the ridge where ember storms swirl like angry gods, and I remind myself that Ash Grove exists because someone chose to go on to believe in bark and mist and spores. That choice wasn't grounded, was a single, quiet decision to scoop water, to sow a spore, to whisper into a microphone that the oasis was real. I'm haunted by the ghosts of choices past. I think of Dr. Hoss's lab coat name, badge rusted. Now, probably buried beneath smoldering debris somewhere. Did he reach the coordinates? Did his bones lie there, still clutching that journal? I wonder if he'd forgive me for taking his work to build Ash Grove. I replay my own choice to lead Marta and Caleb here, knowing the ember hand might follow, knowing the risk of toxic rain and fire. But when I drain the last canteen before dawn and watch their faces light up at clean water, I know I'd do it again. Preparation is everything. We've mapped the ridges and carved cairns to guide new arrivals. Marta rigs simple charcoal filters for the spring's overflow and teaches foragers to identify non-toxic mushrooms. Caleb stands guard at night, scanning the darkened ridge for lanterns, for drone glints, for ember sparks. I monitor battery levels, ration broadcast time, and keep the pedals of the generator turning, one crank at a time. Each of these acts so small, so repetitive are our vows to fight on. Sometimes, when the radio crackles and I hear a voice I don't recognize, someone calling back after weeks of silencer, surge of emotion nearly stops my heart. Just yesterday, a whisper, I'm here, I'm coming. It was the softest promise, but in that moment, it carried the weight of 100 storms. Whoever you are, whoever you'll be, know this. The path here is narrow and treacherous, but you're not walking. It alone, the world outside Ash Grove, remains a tapestry of ruin and resistance. There are flickers of community beyond the huzzy small bands clinging to rail cars with rooftop gardens, desert camps harvesting cacti water, river valleys where children dare to splash despite the ash. I hear their voices, faint but insistent, on frequencies I once used for weather alerts. They're out there, alive, raising embers of life in the darkness. And so my final message is not a rallying cry or a sermon. It's a simple plea. Keep tending your spark. When you feel the weight of smoke in your lungs, when you taste desperation on your tongue, remember the moss beds here, the saplings in planters, the taste of pure water on parched lips. Remember that every bead of sweat, every grain of soil, every broadcast in the static is a testament that we refuse to let the world burn without a fight. I'm not naive about the dangers ahead. Ember storms will swirl back over these ridges. Ember hand will scout again. Toxic rains will return with shifting winds. But I've seen fungus knit loose earth into living soil. I've tasted water that sparkles like life itself. I've watched seeds crack open in the ashes. That's enough to steel my resolve for one more day. Tomorrow I'll crank the generator at dawn, check the water levels, and light the smallest signal fire on the ridge crest. I'll broadcast our coordinates, share our methods, and remind every ear that hears me, you are not alone. We are the Ash Grove Fellowship, and we stand guard over life's fragile promise. We carry water in our hands and hope in our hearts, because as long as we have water, spores, and broadcast waves, we still have a chance. And as long as a single voice speaks into the static, the ember of survival can never be fully extinguished. Keep breathing, keep hoping, keep growing. The world may be forged in flame, but from these ashes we will find new root sand. In them, the future